All right, y'all. I think I'm live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So first off, I want to say hey, because I know I haven't done a video in a while. That's been because I've been busy with shows. When you do Comic Cons, when you do comic conventions, when you do, book signing events, anything like that, that's a lot of work to get together. And it's great because I love meeting the fans. But if you notice, most of my videos lately have been on when I was at a show. So you can see that on my YouTube channel. You can see that on my Instagram. Uh, so I've been really busy lately doing shows. So I know this is my first video in a while, but that's what's been going on with that. Second of all, I'm not going to do a The Marvels review because I refuse to see that film, especially to pay to see it. Number one. Number two, there's a plethora of incredible reviews all on YouTube that will dissect that film 6 ways to Sunday if that's what you want. Okay. Instead, what I'm going to do is a video on what Marvel needs to do. Okay. Let me put that on the screen. What Marvel needs to do. So I'm going to do a video on that. Okay. So first thing Marvel needs to do is Marvel needs to bring a definitive conclusion to the era of the MCU. Now, truth be told, they already had it with Endgame, but maybe they didn't know that was the thing to do next. They seem to have thought that the thing to do after that was to flood the market with more content, more content, more content, more content. That might have worked had they prioritized quality over quantity. But it seems that they got obsessed with bringing as many new shows or as much content to the marketplace as they could instead of making high quality films and shows. So the MCU needs to have a definitive endpoint, meaning this is the end of this era. This is the end of these actors in these roles. This is the end of this kind of agenda, the wokeness that has infected them. This is the end of that. There needs to be a definitive endpoint. It should have been Endgame. And a lot of people fell off after Endgame. A lot of people lost interest after Endgame. A lot of people just stopped watching because as far as they were concerned, that was the endpoint. Okay, if we go back to Iron Man 2008, the whole underlying and overarching story was about the Infinity Stones and the coming of Thanos. So when they dealt with that, that was the end for a lot of people. That was the story end. That was the point that would have made the most literary sense to let it go, was at that point. But they didn't. And I only watched a handful of the Disney Plus shows. I watched WandaVision and I watched Moon Knight, but I just refused to watch the rest because I knew what it was going to do. It was going to be deconstructionist. They were going to deconstruct all of the wonderful things that they established in the movies. And sure enough, they did. Exception obviously would be the Daredevil Netflix series and the Punisher as well, but I'll get to that in a minute. So first thing Marvel needs to do is, let me put that on the screen. They need to establish a definitive endpoint to the MCU. And like I said, Endgame was the natural, organic thing that was already built in to do that. But what has happened with the Marvels is the culmination, it's the epitome, it's the peak example of how everything after Endgame and all their content being infused with wokeness has run its course. So the superhero fatigue is not with superheroes, because you hear me say all the time, Superman's been around since 1938. Superman was the character that established superheroes as we understand them. He was not the first superpower character to have adventures, but the cape, the shield, the trunks on the outside. Superman is the one that established that as kind of the model for superheroes, and then Batman followed a year later. Okay, so that's 85 years that neither one of them two have been out of print. So you can't tell me that people are tired of superheroes. No, they're not. What they're tired of is bad superhero takes, and what they're tired of is the infecting of wokeness in the content, where the content is more about, because I'm going to define what I mean by that. There's been a discussion all week on Twitter about Mary Sue's and what they are and what they aren't. And my position has always been that words change and words evolve, and words don't always mean the same thing. They don't always cling tenaciously to their original meaning. They grow and expand and change. Wokeness used to mean be aware and stay awake to the games being played in the culture, and the systems that are designed to penalize some and uplift others, and built-in prejudices in the law and things like that. That's what stay woke started out meaning. It meant don't be deceived by a system that is not for you. Okay? That's what wokeness started out meaning, and I know that. But what people mean now when they say something is woke, they mean the following. They mean that normally it takes an established male character and humiliates them and denigrates them to replace them with a female character. It means normally that the story that they're telling now is stepping on and disrespecting and minimizing and humiliating and trying to destroy the foundation, the thing that it was built on. It means now that it's about having a preachy agenda about telling people what they should think and what they should feel and what they should accept and what they should get behind. It means now including a lot of Mary Sue's, meaning they think the character doesn't have to earn anything, they just get it handed to them. Okay? That's generally what people mean now by wokeness. So when people say, that, it's gone woke, that's what they mean, not the original meaning of stay woke. And so that has been undeniably a part of where Marvel was headed. And Kevin Feige himself said that he was looking forward to replacing the male characters and having more female characters than male characters, which doesn't make any sense. Why can't you have both? Why can't you feature all your popular characters, and it doesn't have to be a competition, and it doesn't have to be about belittling the men. It doesn't have to be about that. But when you make it be about that, then you identify your content as woke. Okay? And that's the difference between a writer and an activist, or a writer and a hack. And then some people are hacktivists. Okay? They don't know how to create characters. They don't know how to create stories. They don't know how to do their job. They're just there to get on a soapbox and preach their agenda and try to shove what they're doing down your throat over and over and over again. And then they attack you when you have the nerve to have a different opinion. Because it's not about fairness, it's not about equality, it's about them trying to make you bend to their will. Okay? That's always obvious, because you can't hide that. When that's what you're doing, you can't hide that. It will be obvious. And so much of the content that Marvel has put out since Endgame has been infected by wokeness. So what they need to do is draw a line, come to a conclusion, come to an endpoint, and say, this is it. This is the end of the MCU as it was first established with Robert Downey Jr. This is the end of those movies. This is the end of those TV shows. This is the end of that era. That's the first thing they need to do. Draw a clear line of demarcation, say that that's over. That's the first thing Marvel needs to do. Second thing Marvel needs to do, it's coming up on the screen now. Second thing Marvel needs to do is they need to disappear for a while. Star Wars made the same mistake. A Star Wars movie used to be an event, a major event, where when it was time to go see a Star Wars movie, the lines would be wrapped around the movie theater where you couldn't get in if you didn't buy tickets ahead of time. When I took my son to see Revenge of the Sith, we had to go to the 2 a.m. show because that was the only show they had to show that movie around the clock. We wanted to see it so bad. We wanted to see Anakin become Vader so badly. And so the Star Wars films used to be an event. Marvel films used to be that way too. They used to be an event. And in fact, Infinity War and Endgame in particular, is the best grossing, highest grossing superhero movie of all time. So they used to be an event. But when you flood the market with content after content after content, and you don't allow your audience to breathe, you don't allow your audience to miss you, okay? Because you discover the same thing in relationships. A lot of people discover that in the pandemic, that just, being around, leaving your loved ones all the time, for some people, they couldn't deal with that because sometimes people need to miss you. Okay? So I gave you a professional example and I gave you a personal example, but Marvel needs to disappear for a while. And I mean, completely disappear and let the audience miss them. Okay? And when that happens, it will begin to recreate a desire for more content. But when you just content after content after content with no end in sight, and you never give your audience a chance to breathe or miss you, okay? Because if you notice, when you get enough time and space and distance between any event, when you think about it, it's easier to think about the fond memories. It's easier to think about the nostalgia. It's easy to think about the good times that you had once you get enough space and distance from it. And that's the principle that needs to be applied here. Marvel needs to disappear. And I mean, go away, okay, for a while. Because the audience will still be there when you get back, because people aren't going to get tired of superhero content. They're just tired of bad superhero content. They're tired of woke superhero content, but superheroes as a genre, okay, has been around for 85 years. So the second thing Marvel needs to do is disappear for a while. Third thing Marvel needs to do is this right here. Marvel needs to go scorched earth. What do I mean by that? I mean that the Marvels needs to be the last thing they release, and they need to get rid of everything else. And they need to, whatever plans they had, they need to scrap all that because they don't need to continue the MCU after the Marvels. Now, if you don't know anything about the Marvels, although I don't know how you can't at this point because they have been all over the news for the last week, but the Marvels features the return of Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, Monica Rambeau, who they don't name in the movie, and Kamala Khan as Ms. Marvel. If you don't know anything about Carol Danvers from the comics, you'd really have to read her long and storied history. But she's gone through a lot of changes, and her peak was when she was Ms. Marvel with her navy blue uniform with the Z yellow thin lightning bolt. That was her peak in terms of her comic development. When she got turned into Captain Marvel as a substitute or replacement or a usurpment for Marvel, that has never stuck because she was binary for a while. She was Warbird for a while. And I know what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to you if you don't read comics because you don't get any sense of that. The sense you get from her movies is that she was always awesome and she's super awesome. And all she ever has to do is remember how awesome she is. There's no struggle. There's no arc. There's not even any weaknesses. There's nothing like that. Because once Carol Danvers got elevated to Captain Marvel, she became so ridiculously overpowered until she became boring. Because the things they accuse Superman of, Captain Marvel actually is in terms of being so overpowered and one-dimensional that she's boring, because she is. She is both way overpowered and way one-dimensional. in any of the films you see Captain Marvel in, you know she's never in any danger. Okay, Thanos hits her right in the head, and she just looks back at him with kind of, you know, that kind of glare, you know, kind of scowling at him. She's never, when Steve Rogers went against Thanos and Thanos was trying to crush him, Cap pushed back, but you could see that he was straining, and Thanos was surprised at how strong Cap really is. When Thanos hit Carol, she just boom, she just looked at him. Like, is that all you got? So I mean, she's never in any danger. And if there's no danger, if there's no real danger, there's no real tension. Okay? And she restarts the sun in the Marvels. Now, if she's got enough power to restart a sun, I need you to think about the level of energy you'd have to generate to make that happen. How is anything a threat to her ever? How? See, in terms of Monica Rambeau, she's the character that was done the most wrong. Because if you don't understand her from the comics, you don't know that she was actually the first person to carry the title of Captain Marvel after Marvel, not Carol. And she evolved, and her powers evolved, and they didn't even really name her Photon in the Marvels movie like they should have. And also, I want you to notice that her powers in the movie in particular, the Marvels, is undefined. What exactly can she do? Access light, harness light, what else can she do? So basically her powers are utilitarian, whatever they need to be, which doesn't make any sense, because without definition, again, how can there be growth? How can there be an arc? How can there be interest? How can there be danger? How can there be anything if we don't really know what you can do, and you don't know what you can do? But the biggest problem with Monica Rambeau is that they ruined her in WandaVision. Because the last thing she says in WandaVision, as Wanda has finally taken her spell off the town and finally faced the reality of her situation, Monica Rambeau looks at her and says, they'll never know what you gave up for them or what you sacrificed for them. Lord have mercy. Wanda took people hostage, interrupted their lives, killed people, created an illusion because she couldn't deal with the fact that her children were never real. Wanda's a kidnapper, a torturer, and then in Multiverse of Madness, she became a mass murderer across universes. Monica Rambeau should have arrested her, but she didn't. She just let Wanda fly away, and people have never gotten over that. Okay? So the Monica Rambeau that you know isn't the actual one from the comics. Okay? She didn't really get a good shake in terms of book-to-screen translation. And if you don't read the comics, you only know what you've seen in WandaVision and the Marvels. Okay? And finally, Kamala Khan. Now, I must say that Iman Vellani, I think, is wonderful. Her energy is infectious, and she's bubbly, and she's a fangirl, and so is Kamala Khan from the comics. So that part was right. And I think Iman Vellani is living a dream. And I think that energy comes through. So you can't help but love that. So I got no issue with her. But Kamala Khan is a character that they've always tried to sell as important just for being. And she's not nearly as popular as she's always made out to be. So I'm not saying there aren't people that don't like her, and I'm not saying she doesn't have a place and all that. I'm saying the estimation of her popularity has always been way out of proportion for how popular she really is. I'm not saying she's not popular at all. I'm saying it's way disproportionate to the way it's portrayed. So, and with Brie Larson playing Captain Marvel, Brie Larson is at best divisive. Okay? And so you can say other people are divisive too, but stop trying to act like it doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter how we feel about an actor and how we feel about a character. It does matter. It matters all the time. So when you look at the setup for this movie, they didn't really do any of them right. And the only man in this movie is Nick Fury, and he's been relegated from Secret Invasion to being old, to being out of touch, to being useless, to being on the decline, needs to retire. none of the presence, none of the power, none of the influence, nothing in the Nick Fury that we met that was putting together the Avengers all those years ago. You see that? So whether they intended it to be or not, this needs to be the end of the MCU, because we have come full circle. Feige got what he wanted, got rid of all the original actors, got rid of most of the men, supplanted them with female characters, became fully woke. So that has peaked. And that has peaked by showing them that there's no audience for it, or there's very little audience for it. That a Marvel movie cannot command the same type of box office receipts that it did before because of all the reasons that I listed. So they need to go scorched earth and say, this is the end, and we're cutting ties with anything beyond the Marvels. That's what they need to do. Okay? So, number one, I said they need to establish a definitive endpoint to the MCU. Number two, they need to disappear for a while. Number three, they need to go scorched earth on any other content and just don't release that, don't drop that. Let the Marvels be the end. And this is the last time we'll see these actors in those roles. And I know people, might not like all that, but that's what they need to do if they're going to salvage the brand at all. And here comes number four for what they need to do. Number four for what Marvel needs to do is they need to reboot into an all new universe with the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. Now, those of you that may not know the history of Marvel, long story short, they went broke in the 90s, and so they licensed and optioned off their main character properties for money. So that's why Fox had the Fantastic Four movies. That's why Sony had and still has Spider-Man, because Sony ain't never given Spider-Man up. If you think that's going to happen, Lord have mercy. Spider-Man is the most merchandised character on Earth. Literally, there's no more superhero merchandise more than Spider-Man, last time I checked. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man are the top three, but Spider-Man still edges out the two DC characters, last time I looked at any numbers. So they optioned off the film rights to those characters because they didn't have any money and they needed some money. They needed an infusion of cash. It's a very common situation in business, but that's why they didn't have the rights to those characters. So that's why when they did the MCU, they took what at the time was B-list characters, Iron Man, Thor, Cap, and used them, and Hulk, and used them to build an Avengers world. Because everything about the MCU centers around Tony Stark and the Avengers. Literally everything. Now, I know we've got some other content going on. I know we've got Daredevil. I know we've got the Defenders. I know we've got Moon Knight. I know we've got the Punisher. I know that. And She-Hulk. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Okay? But what they need to do is they need to reboot, and they need to do what they should have done in the first place, which is start with the Fantastic Four. But it's got to be all new. Now, what I mean by all new is, I don't mean make the FF woke, which I know they're going to try to do. See, because this casting stuff with Pedro Pascal and these casting rumors, they don't need to rush to do the FF right now. What they need to do is disappear for a while and get together a bulletproof script. Because they have to get the Fantastic Four right. The Fantastic Four, we've never seen them really done justice. And because they're the first family of Marvel, okay, they're the ones that Lee and Kirby created to kick off everything that Marvel would become. And because people have been waiting for a good FF film literally for decades now, they have to get this part right. See, you need to recognize in your life when you're at a crossroads, when you're in the valley of decision, when you're at a point that's going to determine what's going to happen in your life for many, many years to come. You need to understand that on a personal level, and you need to understand that on a professional level. And them trying to continue to pour out content after content after content, content after content after content, and throwing together a Fantastic Four movie and making it woke and casting actors, because I got nothing against, Pedro Pascal, but he's not Reed. He just isn't. And Reed is not black. Neither is Sue, neither is Johnny. And the buzz has always been that this movie is going to be about putting Sue at the forefront, and Reed is the leader of the team. Going into space was Reed's idea. Jumping in the rocket was Reed's idea, and Sue challenged Ben and called him a coward, and that's what made him decide to fly it. But that was all Reed driving that thing, and Ben was trying to talk him out of it because Ben recognized the danger in it. And Sue basically insulted his manhood and that's what made him pilot it. And then Reed is the one that said they should become superheroes without masks, that whole thing. So Reed Richards is a driving force behind the Fantastic Four and one of the smartest men on earth, if not the smartest, in the Marvel Universe. So that doesn't take anything away from Sue. Okay, we need to develop Sue. A lot of people don't know that Sue was on track to be an actress. And there's, a lot that can be done, but that substituting her as the driving force behind the FF, she might be the heart of the FF, but she's not the driving force. That's Reed. Okay? So they need to take the time, get some distance, and get this right. Understand these characters. You don't have to, the blueprint has been laid out with Lee and Kirby. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with the FF. Some of the greatest stories of all time, and definitely some of the greatest villains. You know how they keep saying that Marvel has a villain problem? You need to mine the FF's rogues gallery. Red Ghost and his super apes, the Mad Thinker, the Puppet Master, Annihilus, that's my personal favorite. Obviously, Dr. Doom, the Mole Man. Okay, I would even do a jump for the UFOs. The UFOs are Hulk villains, but the UFOs have never faced the FF in the comics, to my knowledge. That would be awesome. The UFOs against the FF, are you kidding me? I mean, there's so many, obviously the Silver Surfer and Galactus. There's so many incredible villains in the FF repertoire until they need to step back, take some time, and get that movie right. Same thing needs to be done with the X-Men. Because if they do the Hellfire Gala, and if they do, a lot of the stuff that happened on Krakoa, if they do that, they're going to mess the X-Men up too. So what they need to do is they need to treat the Fantastic Four and the X-Men the way Star Wars movies used to be, keep them on a major motion picture level, and only release a film like once every 2 years. That will turn those films back into events like the Star Wars movies were. And if they crush that first Fantastic Four movie, then we'll be waiting with bated breath for the next 2 years for the next one. If they crush that first X-Men movie, and I know there is a time displacement challenge, but it is easily dealt with. They can either set both the Fantastic Four and the X-Men in modern times, okay, which means they would have been created in the 90s if they're going to be in their 30s now, okay? What's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that. And there are plenty of incredible 90s X-Men stories. And remember, that's when the cartoon was out with one of the greatest theme songs of all time. And so they can do that, use that material, or they can create all of the mythology set back in the 60s with the Fantastic Four. They can have them go into the negative zone on an adventure because the FF at their heart are explorers, and have them come back out in modern day. That gives you a ton of storytelling opportunities, because how would they adjust from disappearing from American culture in the 60s and reemerging into American culture in the 2020s? So that right there gives you lots of possibilities. Think about, the expectations about women and what lives were like for women in the 60s. And then Sue comes out from that, and she comes out in 2023. I also want to see them delve into Ben's Jewish heritage. Okay? I also want to see them make Alicia Masters the Puppet Master's daughter like she's supposed to be. And remember that Namor, we got to see Namor in issue number 4 of that original run. So there's so much great stuff there. So the time displacement part with the FF is not really a problem. With the X-Men, depending on how old you want to make them, you can do a time jump, because Beast did a time jump and the X-Men of today got to meet their original people because, and then Jean, there's this incredible scene where Jean got to see the future and she understood everything that happened to her with her becoming Phoenix and all that. So you could do a time jump. You could start the X-Men and Magneto and Charles in the 60s and have Hank McCoy of present day do a time jump and follow the adventures of the team that came from the 60s. If you don't want to introduce the modern day. I mean, there's so many different things you can do it. Even the way Kitty Pryde sent Wolverine's consciousness back in Days of Future Past. Just so many things that can be done. So what I'm saying is it's not a problem. That's what they need to do to reestablish those movies as events and release them no less than or no greater than every 2 years. Okay, every 2 years to make them be events like the Star Wars movies were. And then finally, they need to make TV shows for other characters. TV shows for other characters. That's where Daredevil comes in. That's where Moon Knight comes in. That's where the Defenders come in. That's where the Punisher comes in. Because that content has already been successful on TV. That content works, serialized or episodic. That content, street level fighters can, work with that type of thing. That's what they need to do. So that way, the bigger guns can be saved for movie events, and then the other characters who are not less popular, but they work quite well in the TV format. Now, if they give us some space, if they draw a line, if they go scorched earth with any content that's still woke, if they take the time to get the FF and the X-Men right, they can completely reboot, but I would not call it the MCU. I would call it something else. The Marvel Movieverse, the MMV, something. They can completely reboot what they've done and it'll be all good. People will eat that content up. That's what Marvel needs to do. All right? So leave me some comments below. I know you're going to leave me some comments on Twitter. Leave me some comments on my YouTube channel. And I definitely want to hear what you have to say. I definitely would like to hear your feedback on how this is supposed to go. All right? That's it for today's video. I will talk to y'all later and have a great weekend. And don't forget to wish me a happy birthday on Sunday. All right. DT2 Comics Chat, out.